All right, well, India and the US are racing to seal a trade deal ahead of President Donald Trump's July 9th deadline, when 26% reciprocal ties on Indian goods will kick in. Despite India's chief negotiator Rajesh Agarwal and his team extending their stay in Washington for discussions, talks are stuck on certain issues on either side. Trump has suggested that extending the reciprocal tariff suspension period to beyond the 9th of July is unlikely. He has, however, expressed hope of a trade deal with India in the coming days. Earlier this week, Trump emphasized that the United States and India are nearing completion of a trade agreement that would significantly reduce current tariffs, allowing fair competition between both nations. The question that looms large is, can India and the United States strike this much-needed balance? Well, we'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the program is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, joins us on the show as well. Mr. Sanjeev Joshipura, executive director of India-U.S. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. And Dr. Mukesh Aghi, president and CEO of US ISPF, which is US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, is also here with us. All right. Dr. Kohli, I'll begin with you. Well, if you look at the economics, the trade between both these countries is absolutely on the verge and has the potential to grow even more. Considering the fact that Trump had jolted the entire world economics as a result of his tariffs, there seems to be some semblance now setting in as to what India and the Americans will settle for. In your opinion and in your expertise, what is that middle ground going to be?
Good evening, Vineet, and good evening to my fellow panelists and the NewsX viewers. Well, I can foresee a mini deal kind of a thing happening. I don't really see a final deal because the sticking points in the deal are quite inherent to the Indian economy. For example, agri products. The US wants to push the agri products here, especially the GM crops, the genetically modified crops, which I think is, they have not been encouraged in India at all. And if you look at the dairy, one of the things which came out in dairy was the fodder for cattle. Now, fodder for cattle being used in America has got meat. Now, here, when you serve it to a cow is supposed to be, culturally and religiously, a different kind of animal altogether. We cannot afford to serve them with meat. So, US wants an open and free market for agri products, for its apples, for walnuts. I think India, we should not forget that 50% of our country's workforce is still dependent on agriculture. 60% of the people in this country are directly or indirectly still dependent on agriculture. For a country which is primarily agriculture, we cannot open the gates. As it is, the farmers, they suffer from MSP, they suffer from productivity, they suffer from all sorts of problems that we keep talking about as far as the farm sector is concerned. So we cannot have an open gateway for US to probably have a free run as far as the agri products are concerned. As for India, the 26% tariff levy, which is going to come into that Qayamat ka date of 9 July, I don't know what is such a big deal about 9th of July, that something is going to happen on 9th of July. I mean, all that hype created around that, India wants that 26% should be removed, 10% base tariff, 16% extra tariff, they should be removed. There's steel, there's auto parts, which are being subject. So I personally feel, Vineet, realistically speaking, there can be a mini deal, because I don't think a final deal can be reached in the next, I would say, 48 to 78 hours. Maybe something happens in the next 48 hours. So we are already into 3rd of July. We are just about 5-6 days away. There's a weekend in between when a lot of things do not work. And we are also running into the US Independence Day, for that matter. So there's going to be a longish kind of a weekend in the US. So we've just got 48 to 72 hours to settle. So a mini deal can be worked out. But what I think US needs to understand here is that each country has got its own set of ethos. There is the structure of the economy of each country is different. We cannot, measure everything with the same tape. You want to measure whole world with the same tape. And, in these 90 days, Vinny, there are 200 odd countries. In these 90 days, tell me, other than UK, which is a blind follower, so I don't even count UK for the deal, and Vietnam, which we heard yesterday, poor Vietnamese, they didn't have a choice. They were slapped with 46% tariff. Their whole economy ran around textiles and some of the outsourced electronic manufacturing. They had no choice. They knew their economy, so they agreed quickly. They said, "Jo karoge aap sab theek hai." I think you cannot measure everybody with the same tape. I think that's what U.S. president needs to understand. The sooner that happens, the better it is. But India, for sure, Vineet, is not going to bend down on agriculture, because that is something we just cannot compromise. We cannot compromise on dairy as well. The two big sticking points. India also wants textiles, leather, and shoes for that matter, to not to be subject to 26%. Well, we respect each other's economies, but then we should also respect the structure of economies for that matter. That you have to understand the way we come from, the way we've been brought up, the way our economy has shaped in over all these years, Vineet.
Fair enough. Let me also rope in Dr. Mukesh Aghi, who's joining us from the United States at this point in time. Dr. Aghi, expectations from this deal. Donald Trump, of course, a proponent and a big deal maker and cracker. What's up his sleeve, and how is this likely to be a deal? Which of course India cannot resist, because according to Donald Trump, it's the protectionist attitude of India which has actually peeved him in the past as well, and this deal when cracked is going to take care of it.
So I think the deal which is could be announced today or by Monday, it's an interim deal. It's not a full trade deal. For a full trade deal, it has to be passed by the Congress, and Congress is focused. U.S. Congress is more focused on trying to get the budget bill going on at the moment. The interim deal will cover around 6,000 plus items. It does not look at agriculture. It does not look at dairy products. It does not look at GMOs, because those are red lines, and U.S. respects those, because as my fellow panelists said, almost 60% of the population of India thrives on the farmland. And I think it will be basically difficult for India to concede on the ag side, to concede on the dairy side, because of a religious sentiment, and also on the GMO side. So overall, the objective of the deal is, how do you take the current trade, which is around $200 billion, to $500 billion? The impact of that is not just about driving the exports from India into the US, but when you look at countries like China, which has higher tariff, you look at Vietnam, which has higher tariff, US companies are looking for partnership, which is geopolitical and economic, to move in their manufacturing. Yes, we talk about President Trump saying that he wants to move all manufacturing back to the US. That's not going to happen. I think what we see is advanced manufacturing moving back, but India and other countries can play a very pivotal role. For example, manufacturing iPhone 17, where it was 5 years ago, nothing was being manufactured, and now the Indian exports in the iPhone is crossing almost 30% of the supply. So I think overall, the objective of the deal is to basically open up the market, make the environment much more competitive, and drive the export between the two countries, so there's more job creation happening both in the US and also in India itself.
Ambassador Goyal, your impressions of this deal, something that of course has been anticipated and being worked upon by a number of quarters and parties who want these two great nations to do business, but do it in an equitable manner.
Beneath, okay, when I say something now, after the two economic experts have spoken, I may sound really like an nincompoop, but I'm going to talk common sense here, really. Mine is not economics is not my forte. I mean, I do understand economics, but I don't give lecture on economics. My forte really is politics and political economy. So let me get back to really what you ask. What I see really is complete confusion. Complete confusion in the USA between what President Trump wants and what the Congress is saying, or what the Senate is saying, and what the experts, trade experts, including the Trade Secretary, Commerce Secretary, what they think is possible and that can be achieved. And that's a reason we can talk about interim deal, we can talk about no deal, we can talk about part deal, this and that. But it's going to be very, very difficult to make any kind of a prediction as to what we want. Now, let me get back to really the basics. What is the trade deal all about? Trade deal, if it is about promoting trade between India and the USA, what sense does it make for the USA, for President Trump, to give an indication to the iPhone company that don't make in India, come to USA. You don't have to do it in India. Now, I beg your pardon. You, on the one hand, you want to promote exports of electronics from India to the USA. On the one hand, you want China to stop making iPhones. On the other hand, you want to make the same iPhones in the USA for $6,000, which won't sell. So, confusion. Dairy. Sharad is absolutely right. That kind of a thing will not sell. But if President Trump is determined to make his wishes known to all his sundry and say, no, guys, either you buy this or there's no deal, then the only option will be that our trade negotiators, even if they don't agree, to say, all right, what do we do now? Even if it doesn't sell. And it has happened many times in the past that compromises have been made which are neither financially nor economically nor trade-wise tenable. They don't sell, but you make compromises. What happens if, because President Trump suddenly finds that he's getting a good deal from China, and therefore he can reduce the differential between India and China from 20 to 10. Suppose China gives him a good deal on the critical minerals. What does Trump do then? So what I'm saying here, Vineet, is not really a negotiation on the trade deal. What is happening here is really trying to make out what does Trump, now President Trump, what does he want from India? And we are not very clear. I'm not very clear, because one thing I know, that if India gives what he wants, reduction in tariff on dairy, on agricultural products, GMOs, etc., the only way I see is for the Indian economy to begin to go down and their market to shrink. Will the USA be then happy to have a trade deal with a country where there is no market for its products? I don't think he understands economy or trade. He is a deal maker. He's happy to really negotiate without understanding what he's getting. I'm being harsh, but I really want to have a good trade connection between India and the USA. I want to have a good investment connection between India and the USA, because at a political level, at a geopolitical level, what I see happening is that if the USA shrinks, China goes up, and that is in nobody's interest. But if the USA allows that to happen, then the whole world goes down. Vineet.
Okay, fair enough. Let me also rope in Mrs. Sanjeev Joshipura, who is joining us at this point in time from Washington, D.C. Sanjeev, how would you react to Ambassador Goel's comments about what this might do to the environment that is so dependent on a country like China for trade deals?
Vineet. There are a couple of things that I would keep in mind in regards to this trade deal as it pertains to China. One of the key issues that we just saw in the recently concluded trade deal between Vietnam and the United States is that the definition of the word transshipment is not yet clear. That definition needs to be ironed out, and that would apply, I think, to India as well. Because as we know, there are a lot of goods that India exports that is dependent on the initial supply of materials from China. And that includes India's exports to the United States, right? Whether we talk about APIs, that is in the pharmaceutical sector, or any other variety of number of sectors, we don't know the details of how transshipment is defined. Now, depending on how that word is defined, if America and India on the trade deal that they are hopefully about to do in the next 48 hours or so, as the media reports, if transshipment is defined very, very restrictively and narrowly in terms of India's sourcing from China, that will have a very different impact as compared to whether transshipment is treated loosely and we are only focused in the trade deal on India's direct bilateral trade with America, regardless of the sourcing of the raw materials. So that has not only a trade and commercial factor, it has a overall macroeconomic implication, but it also has some geopolitical implications.
All right. Dr. Kohli, how would you respond to the various perspectives that you've heard on this trade deal? And, no matter how far we want to get away from China, it always comes in.
Well, Vineet, I personally feel as being in the world of economics for more than 3 decades, I find that the business between two countries is a process of natural evolution. No way can you force a trade. And that is exactly what is happening. You can't bully in a trade. You can't force the trade. You can't, slap something that, okay, you'll have to do this. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. You can't bring threats into trade. I feel trade happens in a natural environment. Trade is a natural evolution of demand and supply. The production between the two countries, if I have a surplus, I have it cheaper, you don't have it, I can give you cheaper, and so on and so forth. These are the factors which get, but here we are observing a new dimension of trade where trade is being handled like a bully. That you do it by this date, do it for these products, do it at this rate. I think trade will never have a sustainable future in this manner. And let me just give you a perspective of the US. Look at the US dollar. I'm sure people who follow US dollar, it has fallen down by more than 10%. This has been a 50-year high fall. 50 years, 5 decades, US dollar has not seen that kind of a fall. The dollar index, it's a basket of about 6 currencies, has gone below 97. It's around 96. 58% of the world's cash reserves are in US dollars. 20 to 30% of the debt, the bond debt which countries have invested in the US, that's again in US dollar. Look what this can do to the US economy. I think President Trump is a deal maker. I appreciate it. That's fine. You may be a very good deal maker, although how good you are a deal maker, because I'm sorry to say that in 90 days, only 2 countries that I've heard have made the deal. A formal announcement has come. There may be a few others, smaller countries, but 2 major countries I've heard have made the deal. Not even major, I would say countries with which US was doing a lot of business. Now, why does he want this? This is because there is a deficit. He's trying to level the trade deficit with the countries, which cannot be forced. Trade deficit, he imports more from India. He exports less to India. Same with China, same with Mexico, Canada. I mean, you cannot force your way that I'll have to export you as much as you export to us. It can never be a level playing field. US wants to become a manufacturing hub. I think it has left that era decades ago. It has moved on from there. And if you start producing in US all these goods, look at the cost. Ambassador Goel was right. Look at the cost of manufacturing iPhone. The cost of 1 acre of land in US, on an average, is $200,000 on an average, more than that actually. The cost of 1 hour of skilled labor, I'm talking of skilled labor, is more than $40 an hour. Can you afford to set up manufacturing units? Try doing it. And most importantly, Vineet, these tariffs, they are going to bring irreversible inflation in the US. Why do you think Jerome Powell, although President Trump called him stupid, he said when he didn't change the rate last time, why do you think he's not touching the rates? Because he knows that the fear of inflation is hovering over United States at this point, and it has barely come out after years of struggle. So I think you have to look at it from an economic aspect as well. And I would reiterate and close my comment here by saying that trade is a matter of natural evolution of demand and supply between the two countries. My expertise in production, your expertise in production, my expertise in cost of production, your expertise in cost of production. It is an evolution of all these factors. It is, for God's sake, not a product of force, not a product of bully, not a product of calendar-based deadlines, Vineet.
All right, you're absolutely right, sir. Dr. Raghi, would you concur with what Dr. Kohli has said, that trade has to be about getting along? It cannot, be about condescending others. It cannot be about intimidation. It has to be about agreement.
See, trade, as he mentioned, is about supply and demand, which is the right way to take this forward. But at the same time, when you put the average tariff on the imports, it becomes unnatural. India has a weighted average of over 12% tariffs. US had 2.5%. So you have to streamline to have the level playing field itself. So the whole objective here is to create a situation which is win-win. And I agree, you can't dictate nations, especially sovereign nation, on terms and conditions. But at the same time, India has to look at in every aspect to create its economy to grow and its job creation to continue. And export becomes one viable alternative while the domestic consumption goes up also. So I think if India has to look at its trade with the US, which is a win-win. And if it's not a win-win, then India should not proceed forward in those discussions itself. So we'll know, I think, in the next 48 hours, once the announcement comes in, what are those 6,000 items and what is the terms and conditions on that. Now, coming in on the US economy, I think US economy is robust at the moment. This morning, US announced 147,000 jobs, which was created in the month of June. And that process continues. In fact, we do have a challenge of finding people. Unemployment is below 4%, which is considered almost full employment. In the manufacturing side, the cost is very high. I agree with Mr. Goyal that if you make iPhones in the United States, the cost will be around $3,500, whereas when you're making it in India or in China, it's below $1,000. So the cost of labor is much, much higher in the US. And I also agree that you can't bring in all manufacturing back to the US. I think some will come in, and I think that's where India-US needs to partner. Let's look at semiconductor, where US is focused on 7 nanometers and below on the semiconductor manufacturing, and India is focused on 15 nanometers and above. There's a partnership both countries can look at and trying to see how they can move forward. So I think overall, you can't force and dictate nations on terms and condition. I think the supply chain and supply demand is going to build a balance between all nations itself when you look at open trade among countries.
Fair enough, sir. All right, we've run out of time, but appreciate everybody who joined us on this important discussion.